We're here for the 12th in a 52-part series as we journey week by week through the Daily Stoic. I want to start this week with March 20th. The title for the day is Ready at Home. And the quote for the day comes to us from Seneca in Moral Letters. I may wish to be free from torture, but if the time comes for me to endure it, I'll wish to bear it courageously with bravery and honor. Wouldn't I prefer not to fall into war? But if war does befall me, I wish to carry nobly the wounds, starvation, and other necessities of war. Neither am I so crazy as to desire illness, but if I must suffer illness, I'll wish to do nothing rash or dishonorable. The point is not to wish for these adversities, but for the virtue that makes adversities bearable. And coming to us from the authors, President James Garfield was a great man, raised in humble circumstances, self-educated, and eventually a Civil War hero, whose presidency was cut short by an assassin's bullet. In his brief time in office, he faced a bitterly divided country as well as a bitterly and internally divided Republican Party. During one fight, which challenged the very authority of his office, he stood firm, telling an advisor, "Of course, I deprecate war. But if it is brought to my door, the bringer will find me at home." That's what Seneca is saying here. We'd be crazy to want to face difficulty in life, but we'd be equally crazy to pretend that it isn't going to happen, which is why when it knocks on our door, as it very well may this morning, let's make sure we're prepared to answer. Not the way we are when a surprise visitor comes late at night, but the way we are when waiting for an important guest, dressed in the right headspace, ready to go. Anytime I hear something like this talking about being prepared for the inevitable, and the inevitable being something nasty, I always remember David Goggins. And Goggins, in one of his obviously running videos where someone is beside him with a camera, or maybe there's a camera strapped to a dolly strapped to his waist. I don't know. Whoever is there, it's like those survival videos where the guy is doing all this crazy stuff, and you think, how's he doing this? And then you remember, oh, well, the guy recording him is doing all the same stuff, but with a 90-pound camera and equipment. But anyway, Goggins is saying, when he was going through SEAL training, everyone was afraid the water would be cold, but I wished that it was. I think that it is, this is sort of the smaller part of the Stoic mindset that we often get handed to us. The sort of proactive part of this is the part that we often hear about Stoicism, which is that you have to be sure to put yourself in trial and circumstance, basically to practice for trial and circumstance, and to seek out the hardest road before it becomes the only road. By seeking out challenge and the hardest road before it becomes the only road, what we are affording ourselves is the opportunity to fail. By affording ourselves the opportunity to fail before the inevitability of failure, we learn where the breaking points really are. By knowing where the breaking points really are, we understand that when that failure comes, that's a real failure, baby. And there was nothing else that I could have done about it. There was nothing else for me to do about it. It simply was what it was. And now it is time to move past it. And so this entry is not talking necessarily just about failure. This entry is talking about tragedy, mostly. Disease, losing a loved one, things like that. These are things for which we can also prepare. We can prepare by putting ourselves in that mind space and hoping we don't lose ourselves in that mind space. But by being there, by spending some time there. For example, when was the last time you ran through the numbers on your life if, for example, you lost your job? If somebody came up to you tomorrow at your job and said, hey, you're fired. What amount of money would you have to live on? How much of that money do you have in the bank? How many months of sustainability is that? If you had to grab something, some type of job immediately, how much would you have to earn and how many hours would you have to work in order to simply float financially? These are things, I think, that are necessary to keep doing in our mind over and over. Even if the event is not there, even if the event is not likely, it can always happen. It is something that is perhaps not inevitable, but there is some non-zero probability of this. With that being the case, why wouldn't we want to have a game plan? Why wouldn't we want to have a game plan? So I'm assuming if you're watching this, there's something that you work on your own. I'm assuming that you have some productive type of hobby, whether that's working out, whether that's writing, whether that's YouTubing, any of these things. Say your hobby went parabolic and you started earning a few $1,000s a month at it. Would you take that gamble and quit your job and say, hey, I think I can sustain this, knowing that I've got an extra 40 hours a week to work on it? Could I make it happen? Could I make it real? For me, it's these sort of questions that are often entertaining when I have a 15-minute block at work where I don't have to do it, where I've got my 15-minute break or whatever, when I've got to drive to work, when I've got to drive somewhere to pick something up, someone up. These types of practices running through your mind, number crunching what sustenance would be. Could you live on $150 a month in groceries? Would that be possible? If you got fired, if you lost your job, which of your bills could go? Would you have to have a gym bill? Would you have to go to the gym? Couldn't you go to the public park and do your running there? Throw in some push-ups and some squats. And then when you start answering those questions, well, it'd be really easy to give up that gym bill if I had a 50-pound medicine ball, because then I could do front squats and I could do this and that. And then you start putting away $5 a month, $5 every paycheck, $5 a week to build up towards that, what is that, probably $80 on a 50-pound medicine ball, something stupid. But making contingency plans is the way that we do this type of practice on the financial level and on the sort of entertainment level with your hobbies and things. March 22nd, titled The Sign of True Education. The quote comes to us from Epictetus in Discourses. What is it then to be properly educated? Is it learning to apply our natural preconceptions to the right things according to nature, and beyond that, to separate the things that lie within our power from those that don't? And from our authors, a degree on a wall means you're educated about as much as shoes on your feet mean you're walking. It's a start, but hardly sufficient. Otherwise, how could so many quote-unquote educated people make unreasonable decisions or miss so many obvious things? Partly, it's because they forget that they ought to focus only on what lies within their power to control. A surviving fragment from the philosopher Heraclitus expresses that reality. Quote, many who have learned from Hesiod the countless names of gods and monsters never understand that night and day are one, end quote. Just as you can walk plenty just as you can walk plenty well without shoes, you don't need to step into a classroom to understand the basic fundamental reality of nature and of our proper role in it. Begin with awareness and reflection, not just once, but every single second of every day. This is something that is ringing more and more true to me as an individual. A college education was something that I had wanted my entire life, and then I got it and realized, hey, kind of worthless. The education itself. Now, the time that I spent in my craft, the time that I spent in literature, the time that I spent sort of making myself into a monk for the written word, for letters, that time was invaluable. You can't really get that time in today's world without taking student loans, right? If there was some way that I could have taken a sabbatical from humans for 2 years without any bills, education or not, baby, I would have gotten mine. There is a quote from Mark Twain. I never let my schooling interfere with my education. And I think that is very fitting for this discussion. I never let my schooling interfere with my education. Schooling, so what is the old saying? Price is what you pay, value is what you get. Schooling is what you pay for, education is what you get. You can get education without the paying part. You don't have to bankrupt yourself. And I know it's easy to say this. It's easy to say this. If I didn't get my education, absolutely worthless on a monetary level. I knew that going in. But I was the first person in my family to get a college degree, so I thought to myself, hey, I'm going to gamble on myself. To some extent, my education would not have been completely worthless if I had just stuck my nose in the dirt and gone to school for what I had set out to do, be an English, a high school English teacher. But I got into those classes and realized, this isn't me. This is not me. Looking around at these other people in this room, one thing doesn't belong, Which one doesn't belong? It was me. I was the one that didn't belong, so I decided to pursue literature in general. If schooling is what you buy and education is what you get, then it is simply incumbent upon the student to get that value anyhow. And I think that is something worth looking into on a daily level in our lives. Where is it that we get education? For me, largely, it's reading. But it's also YouTube. Do a lot of YouTubing. YouTube is my primary agent of socialization. And I think in today's world, with so much educational, so many educational apparati, with so much educational material out there, it really is up to us to filter in what filters in. We have to make the call where we want that education to come from. And I think that it is, as much as diet is a series of daily choices, so too is education. As much as fitness is a series of daily choices, so too is education. As much as financial health is a series of daily choices, so too is education. Now, the final day on today's docket, March 26th, which is titled, What Rules Your Ruling Reason? And our quote comes to us from Marcus Aurelius in Meditations. How does your ruling reason manage itself? For in that is the key to everything. Whatever else remains, be it in the power of your choice or not, is but a corpse and smoke. And from our authors, the Roman satirist Juvenal is famous for the question, Qui custodiet ipsos custodes? Who watches the watchman? In a way, this is what Marcus is asking himself, and what you might ask yourself throughout the day. What influences the ruling reason that guides your life? This means an exploration of subjects like evolutionary biology, psychology, neurology, and even the subconscious, because these deeper forces shape even the most disciplined rational minds. You can be the most patient person in the world, but if science shows we make poor decisions on an empty stomach, what good is all that patience? So don't stop at Stoicism, but explore the forces that drive and make Stoicism possible. Learn what underpins this philosophy you're studying, how the body and mind tick. Understand not only your ruling reason, the watchman, but whoever and whatever rules that too. Who watches the watchman? I think that all philosophical sort of subsets of ideologies which are aimed to influence us in our activities. Stoicism might be the best aimed at underwriting or overriding. I'm not sure exactly which would be the proper terminology, but sort of doing away with all of those things which are biological in their drive. Stoicism, to some extent, says, yeah, I mean, observe it, figure it out, but you're better than that, aren't you? All that carnal desire, you're better than that, aren't you? Looking at those chicken wings, you're better than that, aren't you? Yeah, it sure would be a nice day to skip your reading, but you're better than that, aren't you? Right? Stoicism, I think, so far with my experience with Stoicism, is great at providing a constant reminder that philosophy is not the thing we think about, it's the thing we do. And for what rules your ruling reason? For me, I long to have my life a life of letters, a life of communication, a life of creation. That is my ruling principle. But what does that mean? How do I set my life up around that to facilitate these things? How do I act on a daily basis which will provide the platform for these actions to continue in the future? One of the things in my experience, literature begets literature, begets literature, begets literature. And I think that this thing is true for all things in life. A day where you work out and you watch your diet and you get your cardio in begets a day where you work out and you watch your diet and you get your cardio in. Begets a day where you work out and you watch your diet and you get your cardio in. All of these things, good and bad, is sort of a snowball rolling down a hill. It picks up steam. It picks up speed. It accrues more of itself. So when you start making bad decisions, I'm going to smoke a cigar. I'm going to eat those chicken wings. I really want chicken wings right now. I'm going to smoke a cigar, eat some chicken wings, waste a couple hours just listening to music. Well, tomorrow that's going to be a whole lot easier to do as well. So the ruling principle above all ruling principles would seem to be discipline. Something, again, that Stoicism preaches. That is all I have for this, the 12th installment of a 52-part series journeying through the Daily Stoic. I hope to have you back next week for this as well.